Hey everyone, welcome. Sorry a little late getting this posted. I'm getting over a cold and my voice is not as it should be. But let's get started. I remember when I was young, I had this crazy imagination. I'd concoct stories and tales and share them with whoever happened to be unlucky enough to be near enough to listen to me. You could say that my preferred audience was a captive audience. Like when I'd be sitting at dinner and talking to my mom, and then later when my brother came along, him too. That was the best place I could catch them, really. They had a vested interest in finishing their dinner, so they didn't want to leave, so they had to listen to me. Now, when I say young, I'm referring to like elementary school level, the elementary school years. So probably around the time I was in second and third grade when I really got started into this. I mean, my imagination was out there. I would take these stories to school and share them with whoever would listen or whoever would put up with me. And since I was a kid, I really had no worldly experience. So, other than what I saw on TV or heard on the radio or read in books, we didn't have video games back then. Well, I mean, technically Pong was a thing, I think in like 1973, but that was way too expensive, and we were poor. So I use the names of my friends, teachers, classmates as characters in my stories. I would basically parrot them wholesale. And there was this one girl who I modeled as the heroine in many of my stories, although at the time I was too nervous to share with her or share the stories with her or tell her about them. When I built those stories, I often had her in them, and she always had this silly damsel in distress role in them. Sort of like Nell Fenwick to my Dudley Do-Right. Thankfully, she was, and to the best of my knowledge, still is, completely unaware of those stories. And even more thankfully, those stories were rarely written and just shared orally. Any that were written, they found their way into a trash bin eventually, either by myself or through my mom's mass cleanings of my bedroom. There were a few of them that were written, though, and I'm equal parts saddened and elated that I no longer have copies of those stories. I would be highly embarrassed if they were to crop up today, mostly because I know for a fact they were silly. At some point, someone, probably a student, and probably one that I might have cast as a villain in one of my stories, let's call him Snidely, since we're on that track. Anyway, he talked to a teacher, or maybe it was the principal, Mr. Kilmer, and I was told to stop creating these stories. I was told to stop writing. It was you, Pasha, wasn't it? Yeah, I know it is. Email me. We'll talk about it. Anyway, I was told not just to change the names. I was told to stop entirely. It was one of those talks in the principal's office. You know, with the oversized armchair and him glaring down at you from a comically large desk. At least in my memory, that's how I see it. But you know how memory is distorted by time and perspective, especially when you're remembering something from your childhood. It must have been bad, because I recall in my 6th grade class, I think my teacher was Mr. Tompkins, I was told I could submit something for extra credit. And so I turned in one of my stories. I thought it was pretty good at the time. If you ask me what it was about, I couldn't tell you. I just remember being very proud when I handed it to him. So I turned in the story, and he handed it back to me a couple days later, explaining that he was told he could not accept any of my stories, and gave me a test that I could take instead. I think that was the last time I tried to write stories while I was in school, at least until I started college in '97. It's funny how things like that stick with you, and I do still feel a little slight. Not so much at Mr. Tompkins, but at the situation in general. You look at things like that and you wonder what you could have done if you had just kept writing. Maybe I could have been another Stephen King already. So anyway, I used that little piece of childhood trauma to lead you into a talk about the subject of today's episode, the exciting world of character creation and development. So let me tell you something. And yes, this is an invitation to send me your thoughts and comments. And the email is samuel@internetpodcast.com. inkcoffeeandregrets.com. I told you that several times. You should know it by now. If you don't, write it down on a piece of paper next to your phone. Get a tattoo on your arm. If you get a tattoo of inkcoffeeandregrets.com, send me a picture. I mean, I'm not gonna give you any money for advertising, but I'll be amused. That'd be something nice to put up on my website. Anyway, I've told you that before. Unless this is the first episode you're listening to, in that case, welcome if this is the first episode. And number 2, go back and listen to from the start. Catch up. There's only 4 episodes before this, or 5 episodes before this, so I'll wait for you. Okay, you caught it now? Great. Because the rest of us are patiently waiting, and I don't think I can keep them waiting much longer. So where were we again? Oh yeah. So when you sit down and start building the outline to your stories, before you ever get started writing the story itself, how do you create your characters? Where do you come up with the names? Do you give them backgrounds? Do you give them a name? Or do you give them a place and date for their birth? Do you talk about that birthmark on their, left butt cheek? How deep do you actually go into their lives? Some argue with me on this, but this all can be important. Not long ago, I was going through several old spiral ring notebooks. You know, the kind we used to use in school when we were young. The 5 subject ones. I can't recall who made them, but the brand name's not important right now. But you'd probably know the ones I'm talking about. So I find these things and saw lists of names, birth dates, and details about them like kids' names, wives' names, parents' names, even a little blurb about where they lived and how they grew up. At first, I thought I was looking at old directories where I had written down people's information that I knew. So I was a little confused at first because none of these names even remotely sounded familiar to anybody I knew as a kid. Then I ran across a couple names that made it clear for me. Names like Cameron White and Errant Gidman. And a few other names. And then the bell rang. I knew what I was looking at. I was looking at pages and pages of notes that I had created in high school and beyond for characters I was using in various stories I was either writing or wanted to write. Hundreds of names and backgrounds. Ones I set aside were names like, because I thought they were funny, were names like Itzhak Hunter, a special operator from the IDF who spoke with a lisp and had a South African wife and 2 kids. And Isabella Martinique, a French pianist that was also a Russian KGB agent who specialized in poisoning people without detection. And this one I laughed at. This one I must have been channeling Stan Lee. This one's name was Penny Pearlbottom. And yeah, I wasn't the most original with names back then. It seems like I took a page from somewhere between Stan Lee, Ian Fleming, and Douglas Adams. Anyway, she was a contortionist that was also a spy that could hide in suitcases. Then there was Errant Gidman. He was a U.S. special agent who was a blend of James Bond, Matt Helm, and if you know who Matt Helm is, you're older than me, so haha. Frank Drebin and Mr. Bean. No relationships listed for him on that one, and according to my notes, his collection of toys rivaled that of James Bond, but were only about a quarter as effective. Most of them backfired on him. Alright, so you can see that I had a thing with spy stories back then. I think I had this feeling that I was going to be the next Ian Fleming. I don't know. But it's fun. It was fun to look back at them. But these notes were all handwritten and created long before Al Gore invented the internet. So all the names and backgrounds were based on my own imagination. I didn't have any of the tools you have today to look things up or to create them, or to do research on characters, to make sure that the characters weren't something that was already used. So imagine me, if you will, a nerdy, greasy-haired kid sitting in class with my notebook, staring off into the nothingness, and pulling this stuff out of the ether. Yeah, the teachers hated me. Except for Mrs. Pryor. She was great. One of these days I'll talk about her. I loved her. While at one time I would have kept these notebooks, I've recently, at least as of about 10 years ago, have started teaching myself to not be so nostalgic over these things. And most of that stuff entered that category. Pictures of my family, notes from my wife or other family members, letters, things like that that are close to my heart, and things that I might pass along. But yeah, those I kept. They were different. But all the things from high school and the other BS, no. I unceremoniously shredded and hauled all that stuff to the blue bin, along with all the other old stuff like that. So my yearbooks, all that stuff, that's all gone. The thing that fascinated me, though, is that when I found all this stuff, I realized that today, the same thing can be done on a variety of websites, and now with AI, or more accurately LLMs, you can do the same thing in just moments. The ability to create literally hundreds of names with the respective backgrounds, relationships, and anything else you can think of can be done just by typing in a few simple lines on something like ChatGPT, Cloud AI, or Copilot. Now, if you've listened to my previous cast about AI, you might be asking yourself, wait, you shunned AI, Sam. Now you say you use these tools? And you know what? I would have to be honest with you. Sometimes I do. But it depends. Character creation is a crucial part of world building. The process itself of good world building puts your readers in touch with the characters and makes it richer, something that people can fall into and enjoy. You know that feeling when you just get absorbed by a good book? That's what it does. A good story and a good world will have characters with depth. Depth that you can connect with in some way or another, or that connect with your main character and then through you. You don't have to form a bond between all of your characters and the reader, but you do have to have your primary ones have something or be something that the reader likes or connects with. And those characters need other people in the story so that they can connect with to make the story work and to make them seem more real. Now, where I find these tools the most interesting is in what we sometimes refer to as the throwaway characters. These are the people, as the name implies, who just make quick, unremarkable appearances in your story and then disappear. Or not. You know, the pregnant waitress who takes your protagonist's order at the diner, the grumpy old man who lives across the street and hates your cat, but you catch him feeding it and petting it and giving it a treat. The chatty Cathy at the coffee shop that knows everyone and all their secrets and makes sure that everyone else does too. The person who gets hit by the cement truck while they're trying to give your protagonist a note that they saw a man in black leaving on the car. These are all people who help your story move along, but really play no significant role in it. They show up, play a role, whatever that role might be that you assign them, and then they walk away, or they get hit by a cement truck. You might see them again, or you might not. And who knows, they might even become, through your writing, another important character. The other nice thing about these characters is you can, if you like, change their roles and give them more permanence if you think that their role warrants it. You just have to feel it out as you write. Because if you've been writing, and even if you haven't, you'll learn this as you go. Sometimes you'll be writing a character and it will develop as you go and turn into something you didn't expect. As far as the throwaway characters, here you might think of people like King's Raymond Foss or Vonnegut's Kilgore Trout. Characters that really seem to provide no meat and potatoes to the story. But if they were gone, you might sense a hole that was left behind or a vacuum in their place. More humorously, you can even have these characters become interdimensional in a sense, where they appear in more than one of your stories, even if the stories are unrelated. In this case, again, think of Sherman, who seems to show up in various Stephen King novels. They become sort of a Dr. Sam Beckett, quantum leaping from story to story and book to book, just without the added baggage of having to right any wrongs or correct anything that happened before, unless you want them to do that. You can work that into your plot. You are the writer. You do have that ability. Back to where I was going in the first place. And see, this is why I write a script for myself. And you may sometimes catch when I'm working on script and off script. If I didn't do that, I would sometimes get so distracted I'd be like a 10-year-old kid with ADHD and a six-pack of Red Bull. So, back to what I'm talking about. I do use LLMs to help with the process of creating many of those background characters and their backstories. For example, I'm working on a story right now that's set in southern Nova Scotia, near the Maine border. I already created about 10 main characters and have them fleshed out. I did all that by hand. All I really needed was some background people. So I went to Claude AI, which in addition to Copilot are one of my favorites, and asked it this, and I'm actually reciting what I wrote down. Here is a list of 10 main characters and their roles in my story. Then I pasted the list. I would like about 25 background characters that live in the town, make 5 of them related to my protagonist, give them birth dates, backgrounds, and jobs in my fictional town, then connect at least 3 of them to my protagonist through non-familial connections. The list that came out was actually pretty good. Not perfect, and I was able to fill in the missing or confusing parts myself. Now I had my extra people, including their names, relationships, and brief backgrounds for each of them. What might have taken me a couple hours to complete, I was able to create in a matter of seconds. All that was left for me to do was, as I said before, read through each one, clean it up a bit for the story, add a few details that the LLM might have not captured exactly as I liked, and voila, it was done. But the main point here is that while I do use this tool to create my more mundane characters, the ones in the background, my main characters, the one the story revolves around, I flesh those out by hand. They are personal to me, and I want to be the one creating them. So I sit down and I build the character from scratch. And, call me crazy if you will, I talk to them. Which brings me to the next part of the process. Yeah, you heard that last part correct. And I learned this when I was in college. Back in 1997, I had an English professor that talked to me about writing at the time, and he mentioned the idea of interviewing your characters. So, when I'm building them, I do just that. I interview them. So what I do is this. After I've done all the fleshing out on paper or on my tablet, I sit and I talk to them. Mostly this is done in my home office, where I'll sit and look at an empty chair across from me and imagine that there is a person sitting there, namely the character I'm interviewing. And I'll ask questions, and in my mind, they'll respond to me and I write down their responses. Maybe the fact that I do this and I get unexpected responses from them says more about me than it does about them or the process, but it works. I also find that the characters have more depth when I do it this way. I feel more about what they are thinking, what they want, and sometimes I find out that they're either a little or a lot different than I originally wanted them to be. And that's perfectly fine to me. Don't laugh and don't judge. I'm sure that some of you are out there that are saying that you'd like to have whatever meds I'm on. Well, you can't. I'm not on meds. So, too bad. I don't share. But there's this guy on the corner of 8th and Oak that I can... yeah, never mind. Anyway, for the longest time, I would talk to people about this and then get these responses that ranged from dismissive to more like apologetic sympathy for my mental state. And then they would slowly back away from me and push their children behind them. However, I soon discovered this was not a new phenomenon, and authors like Margaret Atwood, Terry Pratchett, Neil Diamond, just to mention 3, also did much the same thing. There's a lot of them out there that do this, and I was surprised by that. Either they interview or interrogate the character to find out who they are, so that when they put pen to paper, and yes, I know that's an anachronistic term, they're not just writing a 2-dimensional character. They now have a person with depth and, well, character. Learning that others, especially people as esteemed as those writers and others, did this gave me kind of a sense of vindication. I was not alone, and my professor did not set me up to look appear foolish, which was actually one of my worries at one point. So all those people who gave me the stink eye when they told them how I do this, that's for you. I also think that this process helps you feel for your character. Personally, and I cannot think I'm the only one that feels this way, I think that you cannot write a convincing character if you don't have some feeling for them. You want your readers to like your characters. You want them to feel some connection, whether it's anger, sympathy, remorse, love, whatever. You want them to give the you want to give the reader a reason to have some connection. And the only way you can do that is to make them believable. And the only way to do that is to make them seem alive. Now, let's talk about your settings. As so many authors have shown, the location of your story can be every bit as important as the characters in your story and the people you write about. Since I'm on an East Coast kick, let's think of places like Derry, Snowfield, Paradise Deep, Collinsport, and of course Castle Rock. May it rest in peace, or pieces. These are examples of locations where the author has taken the time and the effort to make the location as much a character as the people are they're writing about. The locations seem to have their own personalities and life, feeling like another living part of the story. As an example from one of my other favorite writers, look at the way Bradbury presents Greentown in Something Wicked This Way Comes. You read the book and you can feel the fall chill as the town prepares for the change of season. You can almost hear the leaves rustling in the streets and smell the smoke from the chimneys as he walks, or as he talks about Will and Jim navigating the streets. And you can almost picture yourself walking with them. This part, I'll argue, cannot be done by AI. I mean, it might get close, but I think the end result would be too shallow. This part requires the good old Mark I brain, that mass of gelatinous goo between your ears in all its amazing glory. I've used LLMs to research and identify town names and locations, ensuring I was not reusing something that already existed, or a town name that somebody else used. And as with anything you learn from LLM, I verified the information that was provided was correct, all to within my ability to do so. Just on a quick side note here, one of the nice things that some of these tools are doing now is they provide a list of references at the end of their answer, showing where they obtained the information. It's usually at the bottom. I've seen it located elsewhere too, but I strongly suggest you use that, especially if you're going to rely on the data. It just gives you a little bit of backup. Read what the LLM gives you, and then go to the sites and double check what it's provided. They still make mistakes. I don't care what people say. Those things are still hallucinating. Building on what I mentioned earlier, I have a particular fondness for the East Coast, especially its northern regions. It's rugged, stormy, sometimes hostile, and has a character that cannot be put entirely into words, unless you actually see it yourself. I mean, there are areas along that region that do not like people, and you get the feeling that the land wants to kill you. So it takes a special type of person to live there, and a special type to write about it. I'd like to think I'm getting there, but we'll see. And I'm not the only one that shares my love with the North American Atlantic coast. And as mentioned earlier, this means you have to be careful with your places and your settings. Think of it like house shopping. I think that would be a good analogy. For example, Maine is a well-used location and state. So if you're going to write a story set in Maine, keep that in mind, and maybe even make it fun. For example, if you set up a fictional town, maybe make it so that there's a no clowns ordinance, or have it so that the town has carefully placed boxes that say break in case of vampire sighting and contain a hammer and a wooden stake. Like I said, keep it light, if your story allows it. I know, I kind of went off the rails again there, but the point is, research the location you want to set your town, village, or city in, and make sure that you're not the 200th person to put a fictional place there. And don't be afraid to put the same effort into creating your location. You don't want to just make a shallow, forgettable place that is a placeholder for your characters, some place to deposit them where they sleep at night. When you picture it or in the process of creating it, use a similar process like the interrogation we were talking about earlier for your characters. In your mind, walk the streets, map the place out. As you walk down Main Street, and I do mean map it out, on paper, on a drawing app, whatever is easiest for you. And yeah, I know, Every town seems to have a main street. When I grew up in Taft, there was a main street, and here in Bakersfield, there's a main street. But plan your locations realistically. Is there a bar? Does it really need to belong next to the church? Well, in some cases that might be a good thing. Think of things like the ice cream shop, the record store, the gas station. Put these things together in your head and visualize what it would be like to live there and walk around town, meeting some of your characters there. Remember, towns are built with a plan. Yours should be no different. Try to feel what it would be like to meander in the town and feel what it would be like. As I said, draw a map as you do this so you'll have a visual. This can be especially important if you choose to use the map later on in another story, or if there's going to be a chase, or if you have your characters meeting at a location and they all live on different parts of town. I wrote a story once. It's out there on Amazon if you want to find it, but I'll talk about that later. But I wrote a story once where a man was taking revenge on the person who killed his family, and in part of it he drove a very circuitous route around the Salton Sea. I've been around that area several times. I've driven around that area on business, and I've driven that area for pleasure. But when I wrote my draft, I realized that I had had him make the entire circuit of the Salton Sea in 30 minutes. And I realized exactly how impossible that is. So, realizing my mistake, I went through and corrected it. So remember, even if it's an imagined place, or a real place, think about the size and the distances between things and places there. Your readers are not dumb. Majority of readers are not dumb. They may seem like it sometimes, but that's not the purpose of this commentary. No matter how good the rest of your story is, they will know when you messed it up somewhere. They'll know something is wrong. Maybe it's not so bad that they'll stop reading, but it will plant that little itch in their head and that says something's not right. So keep that in mind when you're writing. Readers, like me, who pay attention to the little things, can sometimes be an unforgivable bunch. And you might even be one of those people who you read something like that and you write a letter to the author, which I've done a couple of times. Never gotten a response yet, but mapping is also a good idea, as I said before, if you plan on reusing the same location in other stories or as part of a serial, like if you're going to create a series of books. You can always add names and places to the map. Just make sure that you do so in a logical manner, and make sure that you do so make it realistic. You don't make it unrealistic. Unless the story is going to be something along the whole Stranger Things motif, then, sky's the limit. Have fun. It's sort of like a wheel. And I know I've heard this example before. But you have the spokes, each of which leads out to a character or event, though all are connected on the outside by the tire itself. And then when you have them all connected back to the central hub, which is your town, your village, your starship, your island, whatever you want to call it. So it is important to put the effort into the location as well as the characters. Like I said before, though, your town can be a character. And I saved what I consider to be the most important part for last. It's short and it's sweet. Don't be afraid to push boundaries with your locations or your characters. Be adventurous, be brave, go nuts. If you want to have a nun that's also a secret agent, go for it. If you want to have a priest that's also running a gambling den, go for it. If you want to have a mother of 12 who's also a pole dancer and an undercover cop, why not? Too many people today, even without AI, write thin, weak characters that seem flimsy or hard to believe. It's kind of like going to a bar and asking for a cocktail, and they bring you something that's mostly mixer and ice. That's how some characters tend to be. You want something with a little bit of bite. So go crazy. Since I've been doing this regularly with you, and as my recording this, no one's responded to any of my challenges. So they're still all open. Please, send me an email. Talk to me. I'm going to put this out there for you all to report back to me on. One of the things I do, and it's not just me that does it, and this is what I want you guys to talk to me about, is I like to people watch. I do this to help develop my characters. And I've done this for some time. And if you live in Bakersfield, and if you go to one of the many Starbucks in town, there's a high probability that you've been one of my models. I sit at the coffee shop and watch people. I watch their interactions. I watch how they talk to one another, their mannerisms, how they negotiate their transactions with a barista, if they argue with a barista, how both sides handle the argument. I'm not recording them or anything. I'm not that much of a creep. I do have some ethics, sometimes. But I watch how they interact and treat with one another. How they interact with the people they do know, and how they interact with the people they don't know at the location. Watching people can be very educational, and it will help you create your characters. Just try not to be too obvious about it. And if you are seen, smile, nod, look back at your tablet, notebook, or whatever. But tell me, and I am curious, tell me the most interesting thing you've seen while people watching. Tell me what you've learned about them and how it made you feel. Maybe even what you learned about yourself. And did it improve your work? Is it something that added to your quality? So that's it for today, fellow bookworms and quillophiles. Please share the word about my podcast so that more people can hop on board. I'm super excited by the response my call for new authors has gotten, for them to send me my work so I can feature it. And I've got 5 books sitting in the hopper right now, ready to go. I've just got to read them. This is important to me. I'm having fun with this, and I'm hoping that through all my stuttering and stuff that you're catching on the fact that I'm enjoying doing this. You are helping me make this into something, and I want it to be something to be proud of. So you guys are important too. And on that note, may your ink flow freely and be made of animal-safe ink. May your coffee be hot and rich, and may your regrets be nothing more dire than that time you forgot to zip your fly and did not realize it until after the board meeting you hosted. Goodbye, folks. Until next time.